I leaned against the vast observation window of the orbital station Eternity, watching the final vessel approach, a colossal black structure belonging to the Abyss Devourers, a ship so intimidating it made every instinct urge flight. That sudden, undeniable sense that everything is about to shift irreversibly, and you can do nothing to stop it, washed over me as I observed representatives from all the galaxy's major races gathering, ostensibly to honor the Emperor. The old ruler had passed 3 days earlier, his body now resting in the station's central hall inside a transparent crystal sarcophagus, while an unseen struggle for the throne had already begun around him. I am Kale-7, a spy of the Observer Council tasked with documenting the first acts of betrayal. What I didn't yet realize was that the ultimate betrayal would come from my own hands. The farewell ritual commenced at precisely 1700 galactic time. I positioned myself among the observers, activating every implant for comprehensive recording and analysis. The timekeepers were the first to appear, tall, almost ethereal beings in shimmering robes who seemed to exist in multiple temporal streams simultaneously. Their leader, Chronarch Vase, moved with the certainty of one who knew each action seconds before it occurred, and likely he did. Following them came the Quantum Weavers, small, childlike humanoids with oversized eyes radiating a faint violet light. Rarely venturing from their labs, where they manipulated subatomic particles as easily as children with blocks, their presence signaled that the situation was grave. Finally, the Abyss Devourers entered, towering 3-meter creatures in armored exoskeletons, exuding the sharp scent of ozone mixed with something indefinable. As I observed them assembling around the Emperor's sarcophagus, my sensors detected an overwhelming density of concealed weaponry and defensive systems. Each delegation had brought enough technology to obliterate half the station, and they were fully aware of this. In the distant corner, the entropy wardens positioned themselves, hooded figures whose mere proximity caused metal surfaces to corrode and crumble. Through neural link, my superior, the veteran cynic Torvin, murmured that this might be the most perilous gathering in galactic history. Any misstep, any activation of a superweapon, and the Confederation would be reduced to ashes. Yet the most unsettling thing was that none of the ambassadors, leaders, or military heads showed mourning for the deceased emperor. Instead, their faces were etched with calculation, anticipation, the look of hunters preparing to strike. When the ceremonial orator began recounting the emperor's achievements, I noticed something peculiar. No one seemed focused on the sarcophagus. Their attention was fixed on each other. The timekeepers scrutinized the Abyss Devourers. The Devourers stared unflinchingly at the Quantum Weavers, and the entropy wardens appeared to evaluate everyone simultaneously. My scanners logged 17 covert glances, 9 micro-gestures that could have been signals, and 3 unexplained energy surges from unidentified sources. It became clear the Emperor's death was not natural, and everyone in this chamber either knew or suspected the truth. And the most troubling part, 48 hours after the ceremony, I would receive an assignment that would upheave my entire existence, forcing me to choose between safeguarding the galaxy and remaining loyal to my employers. A dilemma so excruciating that even now, I remain uncertain whether my decision was the right one. After the ceremony, I returned to my cabin and accessed a secure terminal to review the profiles of the 4 major races, because as a spy, knowledge isn't merely power, it's survival. The timekeepers were the most enigmatic, and the Council had the least information on them. How could anyone spy on beings who could foresee the future? Their planet, the chronosphere, existed in a peculiar state where past, present, and future merged, and anyone landing there without proper safeguards would go mad from temporal paradoxes. Their deadliest weapon was the chronological bomb, a device I had only encountered in classified files. It could erase an entire civilization from history, not just destroy it in the present, but make it as if it had never existed, leaving only a void in memory. 3 centuries ago, they tested it on a minor pirate settlement, and the star charts were later rewritten as though that system had never been. The Abyss Devourers were the exact opposite: sheer power over subtlety, brute force over finesse. They evolved on a planet skirting a black hole, and over millions of years, they mastered not only survival in extreme gravity, but its manipulation. Their technology could generate tiny artificial black holes capable of swallowing a planet in minutes or stabilize dying stars to prolong their life by millennia. One record recounted an admiral during a border skirmish creating a micro-singularity within an enemy fleet, collapsing 117 ships into a point no larger than a pinhead in seconds. No one dared cross their borders afterward. Most unnerving, they maintained around 20 contained black holes, which could be unleashed simultaneously, reducing half the galaxy to a maelstrom of gravitational devastation. The quantum weavers appeared harmless, small, quiet, murmuring constantly, preferring laboratories to battlefields. But that assumption was deadly. They manipulated the very fabric of reality at levels beyond my comprehension. They could alter quantum states, letting matter pass through walls or solidifying air into diamond. Council archives described a civil war 2 centuries ago, where one Weaver faction rewrote physical laws over a light-year radius. The direction of gravity reversed, light moved at sound speed, and time flowed unpredictably. The war lasted a week, but the area remained off-limits, as reality had not recovered. Their principal weapon, the truth destabilizer, could annihilate the possibility of matter existing within a targeted space. Lastly, the entropy wardens, the most ancient and fearsome of all, because they didn't merely kill, they made the universe do it for them. No one knew what lurked beneath their cloaks, and few cared to find out, for mere proximity caused metal to rust, paint to flake, and an unnerving sensation of accelerated aging. They wielded technology that hastened entropy, the universal process of turning order into chaos. A beam of entropic radiation could reduce a starship to dust in a minute, as if it had decayed over eons. Their ultimate weapon, the heat death wave, could accelerate entropy across an entire galaxy, pushing stars to extinguish, energy to dissipate, and leaving only frigid void. Sitting in my cabin, I stared at those dossiers, wondering, how was I meant to decide which of these terrors to betray in order to save the rest? The following morning, an encrypted transmission from Torvin reached me, and I understood immediately that something serious was unfolding. He never contacted me outside regular channels, yet this time he used an Omega-level quantum cipher, the kind even the timekeepers themselves couldn't crack. The message was brief and unsettling. I had 24 hours to infiltrate the Timekeepers' delegation and uncover details about a weapon they were developing and how far along the project was. The Council suspected the Timekeepers had assassinated the Emperor using a new technology capable of slipping past every palace security system. My cover was that of a specialist in temporal anomalies, with forged credentials, a fabricated background, and even artificial memories implanted in case the Timekeepers probed my mind. The terrifying part of being a spy isn't the possibility of dying. You grow accustomed to that. It's the fact that after each assignment, you begin to lose track of where your real memories end and the manufactured ones start. Getting into the Timekeepers' delegation proved unexpectedly simple, which made the situation even more unnerving. It felt as though they had deliberately left the way open, waiting for me to enter. Their temporary embassy on the station looked ordinary from the outside, but once inside, time stopped behaving properly. Corridors connected to rooms that had existed minutes earlier, or would come into existence later. I met their chief engineer, a being called Temporus, who confirmed they were indeed constructing an upgraded version of the chronological bomb, one 10 times more powerful than the previous model. Temporus presented simulations and schematics with the excitement of someone unveiling a new toy, not a device capable of wiping entire civilizations from the timeline. The most disturbing part was how calmly he discussed it, explaining that to the Timekeepers, death in the past and death in the future were identical events, simply different coordinates, and if someone needed to cease existing, the moment it happened was irrelevant. Within 3 days undercover, I gathered more information than I had intended, and that genuinely unnerved me. The Timekeepers weren't merely building a stronger bomb, they intended to deploy it soon, and their target was the Abyss Devourers. Their calculations showed that erasing the Devourers from history roughly 3 centuries earlier would eliminate not only their civilization, but also countless conquests and colonized regions, effectively granting the Timekeepers control over at least 3 galactic sectors. I transmitted everything to Torvin: the coordinates of the assembly lab, technical specifications, and the projected launch date. It seemed straightforward. Mission accomplished. Time to evacuate and wait for the Council's commendation. But on the final day before my departure, Temporus told me something unsettling. He said he had known my true identity from the start because he had already seen the future in which I arrived, and that everything I had learned was revealed intentionally, so I would pass it on. His words haunted me the entire journey back, and once I reached the Council base, I insisted on meeting Torvin face-to-face rather than communicating through secure links. I needed to look him in the eyes when I asked. The old man welcomed me in his office, congratulated me on the mission, insisted the data was priceless, and that the Council was already taking action to stop the chronobomb launch. But when I confronted him about how easily the Timekeepers had accepted me and why their engineer had known my identity, Torvin paused far too long, and I saw something in his expression I had never witnessed before: doubt. He admitted the Observer Council had abandoned neutrality long ago, that they had their own ambitions for power, and that the chronobomb intel wasn't meant to prevent catastrophe, but to give them access to the technology. That's when it hit me. I hadn't been acting as a spy at all, but as a courier delivering advanced weapon data directly into the hands of those seeking to become the galaxy's new rulers, and without realizing it, I had helped ignite the very war I was meant to stop. After speaking with Torvin, I couldn't shake the feeling that something far darker was unfolding than mere political maneuvering. A sense of urgency pushed me deeper into the investigation. I used every connection and access point I had, slipped into databases I had no authorization for, and risked discovery at every step. The first thread I pulled was the financial one. The Observer Council, supposedly funded by voluntary donations from all galactic species, was actually receiving enormous transfers from hidden corporations and private foundations. Their identities were masked so thoroughly it took me 2 days to uncover them. And what did I find? These funds belonged to high-ranking members of all 4 major races, including Chronarch Vase of the Timekeepers and 3 generals of the Abyss Devourers. The Council wasn't neutral at all. It was a covert alliance of some of the galaxy's most powerful individuals, all working toward a shared goal. Then things escalated even further. I stumbled across internal Council communications, files so secure I still can't explain how they appeared on the shared network. Maybe someone inside wanted a safeguard in case everything collapsed. Those documents revealed the truth. The Council wasn't trying to avert a war. They intended to ignite one, but under strict control. The plan was both simple and terrifying. Allow all 4 races to weaken one another in a managed conflict, wipe out most of their armies and superweapons, and then emerge as the new authority promising to restore stability. One message even stated openly that up to 40% of the galaxy's population was an acceptable loss, a fair cost for reshaping the future. 40%, trillions of lives, countless worlds, entire cultures, and they considered it a valid sacrifice. The most devastating revelation waited in the operational archives from the last decade. I discovered that nearly every major interspecies incident, every border clash, every diplomat assassination attempt had been orchestrated by Council operatives. For years, we had been engineering hostilities, gradually turning the races against each other. One file described an agent called Ghost, who 3 years ago carried out a terrorist attack on a Quantum Weaver trade hub and pinned it on the entropy wardens, sparking a diplomatic meltdown and the collapse of trade. Another dossier detailed an operative named Shade, who sabotaged peace talks between the Timekeepers and the Devourers by forging evidence that convinced each side the other was planning an ambush. But what truly shattered me was finding my own file, realizing that for 5 years, everything I had done had served this scheme, that every mission I completed was another deliberate push toward galactic conflict. When the full scale of it finally hit me, I felt physically ill. I sat alone in my cabin, staring at the terminal and the data, recognizing that I wasn't simply being used. I was one of their primary instruments. The intel I provided about the chronobomb was meant to be the spark. The Council intended to leak it to the Abyss Devourers as a warning of an alleged timekeeper assault, provoking them into launching a preemptive strike and pulling all the races into open war. I saw a projected timeline in the documents. Week 1, localized battles. Week 2, deployment of tactical superweapons. Week 3, full-scale conflict involving black holes, chronobombs, and entropy waves. Week 4, total depletion of all factions. Week 5, the Council revealing itself and offering peace. Everything had been calculated with monstrous precision, a cosmic chess game where civilizations were disposable pieces, and I had just enabled the decisive move leading to the final checkmate. Now I had to choose, remain silent and save myself, or attempt to stop this insanity, knowing they would eliminate me long before I could achieve anything. I realized that staying on the Council's base meant certain death. They were undoubtedly tracking my digital footprint, and sooner or later they would notice I'd accessed files well outside my clearance. I had to vanish, and quickly, but the galaxy offered almost no safe harbors. Every port and station was under the influence of either the major races or the Council itself. Then I remembered a contact I'd met a year earlier during an assignment on a remote station, an aging information broker named Zix. He had hinted back then about a hidden network of individuals who rejected the official narrative and were quietly gathering the real truth about galactic events. I'd dismissed him as paranoid, but now his words made perfect sense. I stole a small shuttle from the hangar, disabled every tracker and beacon I could locate, and set a course for Oblivion Station, a neutral trade hub in a remote sector where Confederation laws didn't reach, and where anyone could disappear among thousands of refugees, smugglers, and outcasts. Zix found me in a grimy bar buried in the lower levels of the station, where the air reeked of cheap synthetic liquor and engine grease. The first thing he told me was that he knew I would arrive 2 days before I even made the decision. His contacts inside the Council warned him that a manhunt for me was imminent. His underground network turned out to be far more than a collection of paranoids. It was an organized resistance composed of defectors, former operatives, principled scientists, and soldiers who refused to follow immoral orders. Zix guided me through a labyrinth of corridors to a hidden refuge, where I met the people who would alter the course of my life. The first was Cronus, a lanky timekeeper scientist who had abandoned work on the new chronobomb after witnessing simulations of what its deployment would do to the timelines. He explained that wiping out a race from history wasn't mere genocide. It unraveled causal threads across the galaxy, spawning countless paradoxes that could rip the flow of time apart. The second was Graxor, an engineer from the Abyss Devourers, a towering 3-meter figure with mechanical limbs replacing those he'd lost in a weapons testing disaster. He had been present at the initial field trial of a prototype black hole when something malfunctioned, and the singularity began expanding uncontrollably. An entire research facility with 8,000 scientists was swallowed in seconds. Graxor spoke softly, unusual for his species, and the pain in his voice was unmistakable. He had watched his colleagues, his friends being stretched into threads of matter before vanishing forever. He deserted afterward and joined the resistance because he could no longer build weapons that turned living beings into cosmic events. The third was Eliara, a philosopher from the Quantum Weavers, a small woman with enormous, ancient-looking eyes. She specialized in the ethics of quantum manipulation and had authored 17 treatises arguing that altering reality at the subatomic scale was a violation of existence itself. We gathered in that hidden shelter, 7 individuals from different worlds and cultures, united by a single purpose: to stop the catastrophe creeping toward the galaxy. Cronus spoke first, sharing a legend he had been studying for the past 3 years, a tale of a civilization that predated all modern races and had nearly destroyed itself in a war of unimaginable superweapons. His research suggested that this ancient race known as the First Builders, had created a device called the Zero Matrix, an artifact capable of neutralizing any weapon of mass destruction across several light-years. Elira added that the Quantum Weaver's archives also referenced something similar, a construct that stabilized all potential configurations of matter and energy, preventing them from being weaponized. Graxor muttered that even the Devourers carried a myth about forbidden technology able to collapse any black hole and return it to normal matter. Every myth pointed to the same conclusion. Somewhere in the dead sectors of the galaxy, in a star system avoided by all intelligent species for millennia, the Zero Matrix lay hidden, and if we could locate and activate it before the war erupted, we might save trillions. But reaching it meant crossing the most hazardous regions of space, where even the laws governing time and reality failed to behave as they should. We departed 3 hours after that meeting aboard an old cargo vessel Graxor had somehow secured and altered to suit our mission. It was named Last Hope, a title that felt both theatrical and ominously fitting. Our crew numbered 7, myself, Cronus, Graxor, Eliara, and 3 resistance fighters whose task was to protect us in case we were ambushed. Cronus uploaded into the navigation system the coordinates he had pieced together over the years from fragments of ancient writings, archaeological clues, and accounts from those who had accidentally ventured into forbidden regions and lived to tell the tale. Our destination lay in a sector labeled on all modern star charts as the Echo Dead Zone, a stretch of space as large as a small galaxy where some ancient catastrophe had extinguished stars, reduced planets to lifeless stone, and twisted the laws of physics into unpredictable patterns. No one knew what exactly had happened there, but all species agreed on one thing: entering it was a gamble with both sanity and survival. The first 2 days of travel went smoothly as we stayed along the outer edges of mapped space, steering clear of trade corridors and patrol routes. But on the 3rd day, a Void Devourer scout drone spotted us, and within 30 minutes an entire fighter squadron was in pursuit. Graxor took the controls and executed maneuvers that nearly made me lose consciousness. Our cargo ship was never meant for such acrobatics, yet he somehow dodged energy blasts and missiles, weaving through debris from forgotten stations and using asteroid gravity wells to shake our hunters. When one fighter got dangerously close, Elira performed something astonishing. She synced with the ship's quantum generator and briefly altered the probabilistic state of our hull, rendering it intangible. The incoming missile passed straight through us without leaving a scratch. The fighters only abandoned the chase when we crossed the boundary of the dead zone. They turned away as though repelled by an invisible barrier, and I understood that even the Void Devourer's military dreaded this region more than losing a target. Inside the dead zone, nothing behaved normally. The stars gave off no light, yet the void held a faint gray glow with no visible source. Navigation systems malfunctioned, instruments contradicted each other, and Cronus said he felt temporal distortions everywhere, past, present, and future, intertwined in chaotic patterns. We flew nearly blind, relying on ancient coordinates and instinct, until we encountered something absolutely surreal. A planet seemingly cleaved in half with flawless precision, its split hemisphere suspended in space. On the exposed side lay ruins of titanic cities, towers stretching for kilometers, bridges connecting continents, all coated in a crystalline residue. Graxor brought us down near the outskirts of a dead metropolis, and we stepped out in protective suits, unsure what awaited but certain that the answers we sought were hidden somewhere within these ancient remnants of a civilization, advanced enough to create the Zero Matrix, yet unable to stop itself from collapsing. We wandered through the abandoned city for 3 hours, each step feeling like a guided tour through a museum of devastation. Buildings housed skeletons of beings unlike any known species, and fragments of holographic records still flickered on some walls, replaying the civilization's final days. I watched them wage war with weapons that shredded reality, struggle to halt the conflict, and ultimately trigger something so immense that it erased half their world in a heartbeat. Cronus located what appeared to be a central computer within a structure that might once have served as their governing headquarters. After connecting his equipment and working for an hour, he managed to extract enough data to pinpoint the Matrix's location. It was hidden in an underground chamber beneath the city's core, guarded by security systems that astonishingly still functioned after millennia. Elira examined the defenses and said we would need to solve a sequence of quantum puzzles, each requiring a depth of understanding modern science had yet to reach. We spent another 8 hours overcoming those maddening challenges, and when the final barrier finally yielded, we saw it. The Zero Matrix, a sphere the size of a human head, suspended in midair and glowing with soft golden light. And in that moment, I felt we held the key to saving the galaxy, if we could survive long enough to deliver it. We had just retrieved the Matrix and were on our way back to the ship when I noticed something off about one of our fighters. Velx, the man who had joined us on Oblivion Station with what everyone believed was an impeccable resistance record. He kept slipping away, checking his personal terminal far too often, and when our eyes met by accident, I saw something cold and calculating instead of the friendly expression he usually carried. Once we boarded the Last Hope, I asked Graxor to scan for unauthorized transmissions, and that's when everything unraveled. The system immediately flagged that someone had been sending encrypted data packets for the past 6 hours, routed through an external relay, all originating from Velx's terminal. When we burst into his cabin, he didn't deny a thing. He simply sat there with a smug smile and told us it was already over, that the timekeepers knew about the Matrix and its location, and that a fleet was already en route, scheduled to arrive in 12 hours. We restrained Velx and tried to determine exactly how much he had leaked, only to discover the situation was far worse than we imagined. He hadn't just contacted the timekeepers. He had sent information to multiple races using various hidden communication channels built into his equipment long before takeoff. The Void Devourers knew about the Matrix. The Quantum Weavers knew. Even the Keepers of Entropy had received the data. Velx explained his reasoning with disturbing clarity. He truly was an agent of the Timekeepers, but not a typical spy. He was a zealot who believed his race deserved dominion over the galaxy, and that the Zero Matrix posed a threat to that destiny. In his eyes, if any single race gained control of an artifact capable of neutralizing all superweapons, it would hold ultimate power. So he engineered a situation where every major race would converge on the Matrix at once, hoping their conflict would result in its destruction. Cronus was furious. He shouted that Velx had condemned billions, that the great races would now wage war not only against their enemies but for the chance to seize or destroy the one device capable of preventing catastrophe. We faced a horrific decision: attempt to flee with the Matrix and hide in the far edges of the galaxy, hoping no one would find us, though that would guarantee the races would immediately begin tearing into each other, searching for whoever held the artifact. Or take a reckless gamble. I could transmit the coordinates of the approaching Timekeeper fleet to the Void Devourers, provoking a controlled battle that might buy us enough time to reach safe territory and activate the Matrix. Graxor backed the plan, explaining that the Void Devourers had a doctrine requiring immediate retaliation if a Timekeeper invasion was detected, and that learning about a fleet in a forbidden region would prompt them to attack without waiting for official authority. Eliara opposed it. She said we had no moral right to deliberately initiate a battle that would kill thousands, even if it helped us. Cronus remained silent, torn between loyalty to his people and the awareness that doing nothing would doom the entire galaxy to total war. I sat alone in the captain's cabin, staring at the Timekeeper fleet coordinates we had extracted from Velx's transmissions, and realized I was about to make a choice that would define me as either a savior or a monster. If I sent the information to the Void Devourers, a battle would erupt that would cost 5, maybe 10,000 lives. But it might give us the precious time we needed to activate the Matrix and avert a conflict that would exterminate trillions. If I stayed silent, every major fleet would arrive simultaneously. Chaos would break loose, and we would never get the chance to use the Matrix before the races plunged into all-out war. The calculation was simple: thousands versus trillions, a single contained battle versus a galaxy-consuming apocalypse. But the most terrifying part of decisions like this is that it places you in the position of a god deciding who dies today, so others can live tomorrow, and no logic or moral justification can erase the guilt of sending thousands to their deaths. I looked at the Matrix resting in its secure container, glowing softly with golden light, then opened an encrypted channel to the Void Devourer's military command, and began transmitting the Timekeeper fleet's coordinates, knowing I had just condemned thousands of beings while praying it would save countless more. My hand hovered over the button that would send the message to the Devourers. But in that split second, something inside me shattered. I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't choose to sacrifice thousands on purpose, even if it meant preserving billions. There had to be another path, something beyond violence and betrayal, an option I hadn't considered yet. I shut down the channel to the Devourers and turned toward the crew, all of them tense, waiting for my final word. Then the realization struck. We had been trying to play the Watcher Council's own game, using lies, manipulation, and strategic deception. But what if instead we simply revealed the truth? What if we showed the entire galaxy what we had discovered here in the Dead Echo Zone, the remnants of a civilization far more advanced than any today, a race that annihilated itself in a war of superweapons? Aelira instantly understood my idea, her eyes brightening with hope. She reminded us that we still had the recovered data from the ancient system, the holographic records of the First Builder's last days, and that we could transmit everything across all open galactic channels. For the next 2 hours, we prepared the most crucial broadcast the galaxy had ever known. Cronus restored the ancient footage, added subtitles in every major language, and integrated all information about the Zero Matrix, including its purpose and coordinates. Graxor recalibrated our transmitters to maximum output and linked them to several nearby relay networks so the signal could reach the furthest regions of known space. I recorded a personal message exposing the Watcher Council's conspiracy, explaining how every race was being manipulated toward war, and insisting that we still had a chance to stop the cycle if we could resist fear and greed. Aelira added her own message, emphasizing that every civilization must choose between destruction and survival, and that the Zero Matrix isn't a weapon of dominance, but a warning about the consequences of conflict. Once everything was ready, I looked at the display showing thousands of receivers locked onto us across the galaxy and pressed the send button, knowing that from this moment on, there would be no turning back. Either the galaxy would listen and rethink everything, or we would plunge it into even deeper turmoil. The transmission opened with the holographic memories of the First Builder's final moments, images I still cannot forget, their cities collapsing into dust under weapons that unraveled matter itself, their armadas disappearing into engineered singularities, their scientists racing to finish the Zero Matrix when the fall of their civilization was already inevitable. The footage captured the first activation of the Matrix, a radiant golden shockwave expanding from their homeworld, disabling all weaponry within a light year, but arriving far too late when half their people were already lost. The last recording featured their leader, a figure almost human in appearance, and his final message cut deep. He insisted the Matrix was never meant to give anyone an advantage, but to demonstrate that war had become impossible to win, that peace was the only viable future, though he admitted he realized this truth far too late. After the ancient records concluded, my message followed, revealing every secret, the Council's schemes, the manipulation, the engineered provocations, the plan to ignite a war and seize control afterward. I urged every race to pause, to think, to look at the ruins in the Dead Zone, and to ask themselves whether they wished to repeat that calamity. The responses came almost immediately. Our scanners showed that thousands of stations, ships, and planetary networks captured the broadcast, and within 20 minutes the entire galaxy was discussing it. The timekeeper's fleet, scheduled to arrive in 12 hours, abruptly halted and held position several light hours away. I imagined their command struggling to understand how their plans had been exposed so completely. The Devourers of the Void withdrew their forces from the front lines and announced a temporary ceasefire with all species while they assessed the situation. The Quantum Weavers delivered a formal declaration condemning the Watcher Council and calling for the formation of a new neutral authority to oversee interstellar affairs. Even the elusive Entropy Keepers sent a brief statement saying they had foreseen the First Builder's downfall and did not intend to repeat it. The Watcher Council attempted to denounce our broadcast as a fabricated smear campaign, but it was too late. Too many had witnessed the evidence. Too many questions had arisen, and within a single day, resignations and arrests rippled through the Council's upper ranks. Sitting in the captain's cabin, watching messages pour in from across the stars, I allowed myself, for the first time in years, to believe that a full-scale war might actually be avoided, that truth had prevailed over manipulation, and that sometimes the most powerful way to win is not by choosing sides, but by showing that the game itself leads everyone to destruction. My hand hovered over the button to send the message to the Devourers, and in that moment something inside me broke. I couldn't do it. I couldn't become the one who deliberately sent thousands to their deaths, even if it meant saving billions. There had to be another way, a third option I hadn't considered, something other than betrayal and violence. I closed the channel to the Devourers and turned to the rest of the crew, who were watching me tensely, waiting for my decision. And then it hit me. We'd been trying to play the same game as the Watcher Council, manipulating, deceiving, using one side against another. But what if instead we simply told the truth? What if we showed the entire galaxy what we saw here in the Dead Echo Zone? The ruins of a civilization more powerful than any that exists today, but one that destroyed itself in a war of superweapons? Elira immediately understood what I was thinking, and her large eyes lit up with hope. She said we had the recovered records from the ancient computer, holographic evidence of the First Builder's final days, and we could broadcast it across all open galactic channels at once. We spent the next 2 hours preparing the most important transmission in history. Cronus processed the ancient recordings, added subtitles in all major galactic languages, and synchronized all the data about the Zero Matrix, including its location and purpose. Graxor tuned our ship's transmitters to maximum power and linked them to several relay networks in nearby systems so the signal would reach every corner of known space. I recorded a personal message explaining the Watcher Council's conspiracy, how we had all been manipulated and pushed toward war, and how we had a chance to stop the madness if we could overcome fear and greed. Elira added a philosophical message saying that the choice between self-destruction and survival is one every civilization must make for itself, and that the Zero Matrix is not a tool of power, but a reminder of the cost of war. When everything was ready, I looked at the screen showing the coordinates of thousands of receivers across the galaxy and pressed the send button, knowing there would be no going back. Either the galaxy would hear us and reconsider, or we'd trigger even more chaos. The broadcast began with the holographic recordings of the First Builder's final days, and I still remember those horrifying images, their cities reduced to dust by weapons that tore matter apart at the subatomic level, their fleets vanishing into artificial black holes, their scientists desperately trying to create the Zero Matrix when it was already too late. The recordings showed the moment the Matrix was activated, a golden wave of energy spreading from the center of their homeworld, neutralizing all weapons within a light-year radius, but arriving too late when half their civilization was already gone. The final record was from their leader, a being that looked almost human, and his words cut to the bone. He said he created the Matrix not to give one side an advantage, but to show everyone that violence was no longer an option, that the only way forward was peace, but he admitted he understood this too late. After the recordings came my message, where I revealed everything, the Council's conspiracy, the manipulation, the provocations, the plan to start a war and then seize power. and I urged all races to stop, think, look at the ruins in the dead zone, and ask themselves whether they wanted to repeat that history. The reactions began almost immediately. Our scanners detected that thousands of stations, ships, and planetary systems intercepted the broadcast, and within 20 minutes, the entire galaxy was talking about it. The Timekeeper's fleet, which was supposed to arrive in 12 hours, suddenly stopped and held position several light hours away. I imagined their command scrambling to decide what to do now that the whole galaxy knew their plans. The Devourers of the Void pulled their warships back from the borders and announced a temporary ceasefire with all races to assess the situation. The Quantum Weavers issued an official statement condemning the Watcher Council and calling for the creation of a new, truly neutral organization to oversee the galaxy. Even the Entropy Keepers, the most secretive of all species, sent a short message saying they had seen the fall of the first builders in their records and did not want to repeat their mistakes. The Watcher Council tried to declare our broadcast a fake and propaganda, but it was too late. Too many had seen the evidence. Too many questions had been raised, and over the next 24 hours, a wave of resignations and arrests swept through the Council's leadership. I sat in the captain's cabin, looking at the messages coming in from across the galaxy, and for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to hope that we might actually avoid a war, that truth had proven stronger than manipulation, and that sometimes the best way to win is not to betray one side for another, but to show everyone that they're playing a game no one can win. Iliara pressed the last control on the ancient panel, and in that instant it felt as if the entire world around us stopped. The Zero Matrix flared with such intensity that I had to shut my eyes, and a golden wave of energy surged outward, flowing through the vault, the planet, the atmosphere, and then spilling into space. On the monitors, I watched it sweep across the fleets of the warring races, and something incredible happened. The Devourers' black holes blinked out of existence. The Time-Seekers' temporal anomalies unraveled into nothing. The Weavers' quantum weaponry went inert, and the Entropy Warden's decay beams died instantly. In mere minutes, every superweapon the four great races had spent centuries perfecting was reduced to dead metal. Their ships drifted in silence, and their crews stared at their displays in disbelief as they realized their strongest weapons had simply vanished. Cronus let out a shaky, half-hysterical laugh, saying the Matrix's range was far beyond what the old records suggested. It hadn't just neutralized weapons in this system, but across 5 entire sectors, wiping out nearly a third of the galaxy's total military strength in one strike. The next few hours felt unreal. We stayed inside the vault, surrounded by the relics of a civilization long gone, and watched the intercepted transmissions showing how the major powers reacted to the impossible. At first came panic, commanders shouting at technicians, demanding explanations, researchers scrambling to analyze the Matrix's field and determine whether it could be countered, governments holding emergency councils. But about 3 hours after activation, something I never could have predicted took place. One by one, delegations started requesting negotiations, not with each other, but with us, the misfits who had just stripped them of their greatest strategic advantage. Chronarch Weiss of the Time Seekers was the first to reach out, saying he wished to discuss the conditions for deactivating the Matrix, though his voice held no threat, only fatigue, maybe even quiet gratitude, as if he was relieved someone else had made the choice he never could. Then came requests from the Devourers, the Weavers, even the silent Entropy Wardens, all seeking dialogue, all recognizing that without superweapons, war was meaningless. There was no longer a path to victory, only negotiation. I sent them the coordinates of a neutral station in a nearby sector and told them that if peace was truly what they wanted, they had 24 hours to send their representatives there, and that the Matrix would stay active until a real, binding agreement was made, not another temporary truce waiting to shatter. And surprisingly, they accepted. The same 4 races that hours earlier had been moments from annihilating one another now agreed to sit at a table because they had run out of alternatives. We arrived at the station and witnessed the birth of a new confederation, One without an emperor, without a dominant species, only a council where each voice mattered, forced at last to listen and compromise. Torvin and the surviving heads of the Observer Council were arrested, their conspiracy exposed, and their hidden agents began surrendering across the galaxy. But as for me, I didn't become the hero people might have expected. Every faction saw me as a traitor, to the Council for revealing their scheme, to the Time Seekers for taking their secrets, to the Devourers for almost dragging them into a battle, and to the Weavers and Wardens for activating the Matrix without their approval. To all of them, I was a spy who went too far, someone who shattered the old order and had no right to decide the galaxy's fate. And maybe they weren't entirely wrong. A week after the first agreements were signed, I boarded the same worn shuttle I had once used to flee the Council and set course for the distant edges of the galaxy, where no one recognized me and no one cared. Elira, Cronus, and Graxor stayed behind. They had been invited to serve as advisors in the new government, helping rebuild trust and ensuring the Matrix remained a stabilizing force, since it turned out it couldn't simply be shut down. It had become permanent, a constant presence in this sector, a reminder carved into the fabric of space that war was no longer an option. Before I left, Cronus told me I had achieved the impossible, that I had proven to the galaxy that even when every choice seems doomed, when treachery and violence feel like the only routes left, there is always another path, one that demands more bravery than any battle. I'm not sure if he believed it, or if he was just trying to ease the weight of being both the most wanted and the most unnecessary person alive. Sometimes late at night I stare at the stars from the window of some forgotten outpost and think about how far away, in the core of the Confederation, 4 great races are learning to live without their superweapons, learning to speak instead of threaten, and that maybe, for the first time in ages, the galaxy has a real chance at peace. And if I had to be seen as a traitor by everyone I once cared about to make that happen, then perhaps it was worth it, even if saving the universe turned out to be the loneliest path of all.